Hey everyone, today I'm going to show you how to replace the alternator on a Honda S2000. Today I'm working on my alternator to replace the alternator rectifier so that I can fix the common flickering instrument cluster issue. However, this video can also serve as a reference for several other jobs that require alternator removal, like when replacing a clutch. Anyway, let's get to it. The first thing you want to do is remove the air intake. This will give you some much needed room to work with to remove the alternator. If you need help doing that, I've got videos that will be linked down below. The next thing you want to do is disconnect the negative terminal on the battery, since we'll be messing with electrical components. Use a 10mm socket and a ratchet to loosen the negative terminal. Move it off the battery once loose. In order to remove the alternator, you'll have to remove the serpentine belt. Use a 14mm deep socket and a ratchet to rotate the belt tensioner counterclockwise so that tension is removed from the serpentine belt. Once tension is relieved, pull the serpentine belt off of the belt tensioner and the alternator and move it to the left side of the belt tensioner. Next, use a 14mm socket and ratchet to remove the two bolts holding the alternator in place. If you've never removed your alternator before, these bolts might have a hard time coming off, so don't be afraid to use a breaker bar. Once the bolts are removed, the alternator will be able to swing from side to side, but it might be still stuck on the bottom bracket. In order to break it free, you'll have to pry it upwards with something. I use the end of a 3/8 inch ratchet to nudge it loose. The last thing holding the alternator in place will be an electrical connector and a wire on the back side of the alternator. The electrical connector will be bright green or blue and should be easily removed. Just stick your hand behind the alternator, squeeze the electrical connector, and pull it out from the alternator. The wire is a bit more difficult to remove. It is shielded by a rubber cover and it's held in place with a nut. Pull the rubber cover back until the nut is exposed, and then use a 12mm socket and a ratchet to remove the nut. It will take some wrestling with the upper radiator hose, but once the nut is loose, be careful not to lose it. Once the nut is removed, you can pull the wire off of the stud on the alternator. At this point, the alternator will be completely free and can be pulled out of the car. Insert your replacement alternator into place and reinstall the electrical connector onto the back of the alternator by pushing it into place. Then place the wire onto the stud on the alternator and use a 12mm socket and a ratchet to tighten the nut, securing the wire to the alternator. Torque it to 9 foot-pounds. Once the nut is secure, replace the rubber cover so that it fits neatly over the wire. Lastly, wiggle the alternator so that it sits between the bottom bracket correctly and both bolt holes line up. Next, use a 14mm socket and a ratchet to reinstall the two bolts holding the alternator in place. The longer bolt will go through the bottom bracket and the shorter bolt will go through the top hole. Torque these bolts to 33 foot-pounds. Now you'll have to replace the serpentine belt. Line up the serpentine belt onto the alternator pulley and place the serpentine belt next to the belt tensioner. Then use a 14mm deep socket and a ratchet to rotate the belt tensioner counterclockwise until there is enough slack to slip the serpentine belt onto the belt tensioner pulley. While you're buttoning things up, you don't want to forget to reconnect your battery. Connect the negative terminal on the battery and then use a 10mm socket and a ratchet to tighten the negative terminal. You're almost done. One of the last things you'll need to do is reinstall the air intake. If you need help doing that, I've got videos that will be linked down below. And that's it. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and smash that subscribe button if you'd like to see more. As always, feel free to leave a comment down below with a video you'd like to see in the future.